Science and technology can cause changes to every portion of our lives. Sometimes, even while it's happening, we have no idea whether it will be a positive change or a negative one, but usually it will be a lasting one. In today's episode, we have three sworn enemies that have known nothing about the other side other than that they are the bad guy, for so long that they struggle to work together in their moment of shared need. As they learn more about their predicament, however, they also learn more about themselves and the past. Please enjoy our presentation of the Dyson Trio.
The Polyverse presents the Dyson Trio. What in the name of... what happened? Groaned Alexander as he came to and rubbed the temples of his pounding head. Lying on his right side, facing a wall, all he saw as he moved to a sitting position was a smooth blue-white ceramic surface. He knew that there were others in the room, but as they currently didn't appear threatening, he focused on where he was first. So far, there was nothing that appeared helpful. He was tall, with brown hair and brown eyes. His build was a perfect balance of lean muscle and low body fat. Even the simple white one-piece suit he was in could not hide his perfect specimen of a body. There was no visible light fixtures, but the whole room was bathed in a strange, shadowless light. Other than people, there was nothing else in the room. In fact, there was no real distinguishing features of the hotel-sized cell. "Whatever happened, I'm sure it's your fault, shit for brains," scoffed Kira, to Alexander's left. "Men are so unfocused." Kira was tall as well, and her form was lithe and sinewy. Her shoulder-length strawberry blonde hair gleamed with youth. She also wore a white one-piece suit. It stretched pleasantly around her four perfectly sized mammillaries, and somehow allowed her long and fluffy tail to whip about. Apparently, whoever put them in this box also took their clothes. Not a pleasant thought to dwell on. "Hey!" Alex was immediately on the defensive, standing up and turning to confront his accuser. "I am the result of 300 years of selective breeding to make the smartest, strongest, and I'm the most human here." The voice had been pleasant to hear, but when he noticed the source, he was deflated. He had grown up his entire life being told that the cult of transgenics, those that combined their DNA with that of animals in an attempt to improve their attributes, were at the very least misguided. But, despite himself, he felt a twinge of arousal. Unfortunately, his body followed suit. She was, other than being a transgenic, perfect. "Yeah, that's the problem. You're only human," she harumphed, immediately hating herself for entertaining pleasant thoughts about his voice. For a moment he was lost in her jade eyes, and the music of her voice disguised the meaning of the words. Well, better than being a transgenic cat bitch." At that, Kira's tail twitched in indignation. Her ears folded down in aggressive stance. "Better than being a eugenic ape turd." Only a eugenicist would use her heritage as a curse word. Her heart skipped a beat in grief. He was just so good-looking. For a moment they both looked at each other, warring with themselves, forgetting the third presence in the room. "You are both pathetic meat sacks," finally announced the third androgynous voice. "But that is not the most pressing issue here." 01769 was a cyborg. Though there was no gender in the hegemony, most organics preferred to use masculine pronouns for them all. Through the selected replacement of parts of their biology, including bits of their brain, with cybernetic components, they achieved physical and mental capabilities far in excess of others. One of the organic bits they removed was the amygdala. They had no emotions and no need for organic propagation. They countered this bit of bad news by artificial means, hence lack of gender. Alex and Kira looked over 017, trying to wrap their minds around his sight. The hegemony of augmenters had left the solar system centuries ago, and neither had expected to see one. Ever. Despite the nature of him, not all organic, and no outer organs to cover up, their captors had given him the same type of strange synthetic white suit that they had on. "Oh great, an augmenter," Kira finally sighed. "You're a cyborg. That means you are mostly organic, too. For your information, I am 7/13ths augmented. 017 calculated the most efficient means of antagonizing the fully organic pair. Normally, it was not a good idea to provoke organics. In fact, the hegemony had left for that reason. But these were not normal circumstances. It was best, most logical, and tactical to have all options available. That meant the organics had to work together. That meant they needed a common enemy. That meant he had to attract disdain. A to B to C, etc. Logic always prevailed. Unfortunately, while emotions were not logical, anger was at least quasi-predictable. "Fuck you, Cyborg," Kira groaned, turning to the better side of Alexander and crossing her arms. "We have moved beyond the need for inefficient and unsanitary act of copulation for reproduction." "That's actually kind of sad." Kira turned to regard the cyborg, this time with pity. "Yeah, and I can't believe I'm agreeing with a transgenic," Alexander returned, stepping up behind Kira. "But that is pretty sad." His proximity was confusing to Kira. She liked the feeling of strength she received from him, but he was eugenic, a sworn enemy. Her heart palpitated with the need for closeness, and her head strived to stay focused. Meanwhile, Alex regretted his movements as the proximity filled his mind with thoughts that he now had to turn a fire hose on. 017 noted the tension in their eyes and knew the reasons. He only hoped that the common enemy tactic would last long enough to get things accomplished. "Now that you have found a common ground, insofar you both fornicate like demonic weasels, perhaps we can focus on the most pressing issue." Alex was unaccountably repulsed by the cyborg, and curious at the same time. He wanted to see how far he could antagonize the Cyberman, despite the danger such antipathy could mean. He had no idea what his name was, but he did know the names of a few cyborgs from cinema past. "And what would that be, Murphy?" Choosing to ignore the insult, it was planned to attract the ire after all, and he could not be insulted anyway, 017 elaborated. "This is, in essence, a captive situation. We should consider the pros and cons of escape." "Really, Kira?" Kira laughed. "And what would the cons be?" "Well, for one, we don't know who or what our captor is, or even why we're incarcerated. There could be a good reason," Alexander shrugged. "For a reason he couldn't place, wanting to impress the girl. Like a hostile environment beyond the door." "Yeah, I'm still going with this is all your fault," Kira scoffed. "Hey, I was only following your colony ship." "Why the she demanded, glad to have something to be angry at him about. "We of the Eugenics Cooperative keep tabs on all our potential enemies, especially cat bitches." "You realize, ape turd, that a cat bitch, as you call me, well, we are the alphas." "Yeah, the ones that are bred to be in charge. Brilliant." "You can't tell me you guys don't breed for specific purposes." "We are matched for characteristics, yes, but after that it is an individual's responsibility to progress." "It seems that we are again off target," 017 interrupted. "We need to be prepared for any opportunity that presents itself." "First, I want to know what you were doing, C-3PO," Alex returned. "Yeah, spill, Jaime," Kira reluctantly agreed, liking the idea of cinematic nicknames for the third wheel. "To progress the plot, it seems I have no choice." 017 appeared to shrug. "For future reference, my official designation is 01763. "Designation, huh? My designation is Kira Ariana Kelsoma Vratan. How about you, ape turd?" "Alexander Orpheus Wells Smith. Let 017 whatever continue. I was sent to investigate a gravity well and EM emissions. Turned out to be a Dyson sphere. I was then attacked." "That was you?" Kira demanded. "Son of a bitch!" "It appears that you are at fault for our current predicament," 017 returned. "Rest assured, however, I do not, and cannot, and will not hold it against you. Fear is an emotion, and meat sacks tend to be overly emotional." "Hey, watch your mouth!" "Great, it's that time of month." "Shut the f*** up, ape turd!" "Continuing," 017 insisted. "It appears something on the sphere acted, presumably in self-preservation, then apparently saved us, once the danger to the structure itself passed." "What about our ships?" Alexander started. "And our crews." Discovering the answers to questions pertaining to those lines of thoughts would count for the pros column of escape, 017 observed. So is the fact that there is no visible ventilation. Kira walked to the nearest wall and looked at it closely. What are you doing? Alexander asked, wishing he wasn't enjoying the view. We got in here somehow. That means that there is a door somewhere. Not necessarily. 017 began scanning the walls himself. A race advanced enough to build a Dyson sphere may have other options. There could be some kind of mass transfer device, like a transporter or tesseract. Not helping, Hal. Alexander sighed, keeping up the name game, as it helped keep him calm as he reluctantly joined the search. Meticulously, the trio searched in silence for the better part of eternity. Whenever each was certain that they were not being observed, both Kira and Alexander snuck looks at one another, with expressions alternating between forced disgust and awe. 017, for his part, did his best to ignore the bickering lovebirds. Suddenly, a change in pressure prompted them to look across the room. That's a little too convenient, Alexander grimaced, cautiously approaching the new opening. Unless one of you touched something? Don't look at me, ape turd, Kira groaned, pissed that it was suggested that she did something else wrong. You could have taken credit, trying to make yourself look better for me. As if, she scoffed, wondering why she didn't. Should we, go through it? Convenient or not, it is an option, whereas before we had none. 017 stepped with a purpose to the hole. Here we have nothing. There is a possibility space. 7 of 9 has spoken. Alexander stepped to the side to let 017 have full access to the door. It's your idea. Lead the way. What's the matter, ape turd? Scared? Kira tried to look menacing. Thought you might want to make yourself look better for me. You want to take point? Alexander shrugged. No woman was worth getting dead over, especially a transgenic, although beautiful cat. After you, Icheb. She stepped back to direct 017 to the portal, deciding it was easier to call him names than remember his number. 017 exited without protest, and the bickering partners followed on high alert. They entered a long, sterile white corridor with smoother than porcelain walls, ceilings, and floor. With the exception of the doors, there were no seams to be found. Even the corners, where walls met ceilings and floors and other walls, were rounded. As they passed some doors, pictures of room interiors shimmered into existence about a centimeter above the ceramic walls next to the doors. All the rooms were empty. No way, Kira marveled. The walls are hologram projectors? Well, technically they are volumetric displays. Alex tried to sound nonchalant, while he too was awe-inspired. Alexander is not wrong, 017 offered without turning around or slowing. Stuff it, Tin Man, Kira growled, falling back into step behind. There was no way to distinguish where they were in relation to the ships or any surface, or anything else for that matter. The trio trekked further and further, their feet starting to ache with the lengthy workout. Finally, they made it to the end of the passage, which spilled into a grand chamber reminiscent of an ivory taiga. Stretching away further than they could see, with ceilings higher than the sky, entire countries could fit inside this room. Light selectively illuminated only certain things throughout, but it was still bright enough to see almost everything. The vast chamber was arrayed in grand fashion. There were scientific paraphernalia, workbenches, and equipment that defied explanation. Tubes bubbled with colored water, screens hovered above workstations, readings flashed in a strange alien language. One could spend years in this room and not see everything. This is kinda cool. Alexander approached one of the workbenches. The apparatus on the table was vast and varied. There were containers of fluorescing multicolored fluids, some of which looked like lava lamps. Most of the equipment was beyond any of the trio's ability to comprehend. There were no visible controls. Well, Kira shrugged. I see no bodies. At least that means they weren't planning to dissect us. We have to assume that we are in the sphere. That means the facility could be more vast than we can comprehend, 017 suggested. This may not be the lab that does the biological research. Wow, Lore, you really know how to lighten the mood, scoffed Alex. The splendor of the scene overtook them as they drifted from one workstation to another. Despite spending an eternity exploring the room, they were no closer to uncovering anything about this complex. We should move on, find a source of food and water and stuff, Alexander finally gave up, figuring it out. Stuff? Really? Real descriptive. Here I thought Data was the walking thesaurus. Kira laughed as they converged, examining the nearest stuff in passing. I'm not certain of any action to take, Alex sighed. I mean, we know nothing about this place. Our needs remain the same, however, 017 replied. We still need food and water. And though we are technically inside, Kira started, we are still exposed to potential threats, and I haven't ruled you out yet, ape turd. Together, we stand a better chance at survival, 017 returned. After all, we know something about each other and nothing about this place. I wasn't suggesting splitting up, Alpha 5, Kira scoffed. Just know I am weary of both of you. We know that there is nothing but space here, and back the way we came, there is at least a point of origin to expand from. So we follow the nearest wall. We have at least a little warning of potential enemies. It's a decent enough point, Abel. Nice plan. Chop chop! The decision was made. They went back to the corner and started along the wall. Eventually, they came to another passage and in unspoken agreement decided to delve down that corridor. They continued in silence for some time, the stillness becoming oppressive. So, Ape Turd, got anyone back home? Kira started, finding the silence too deafening. Familial relations are frowned upon. We keep things professional, Alexander shrugged. They do not want any undue pressure regarding individuals. How about you, Catbitch? It was a piss-poor life, he knew, but the council knew the horrors of letting people get too close, and they knew more than he did. He, like most others he knew, liked companionship, coitus being a small part of that. He did not want to risk getting too close to Kira. It was the transgenic's fault after all. He knew it might be too late to avoid feelings for her, but it could not be helped. It's kind of the same. All our offspring are raised in a creech, equal starts and all. For her part, Kira was relieved. She too felt a bit of attraction that she did not want to admit to. So, even though agreeing was agreeing, there was the idea that kept them both together and separate at the same time. She had to remind herself that it was the eugenicists that started it all. Interesting, 017 spoke up from the rear. I was under the impression that most organics regarded kinship with almost religious reverence, despite the fact that the ideas of father, mother, son, daughter, etc. spawn irrational belief in one's abilities, capabilities, and manifest destiny ad infinitum, despite concrete evidence to the contrary. We must all struggle to advance, and those bonds are well known to cause errors in judgment. Wow, something all three of us agree on. Anyone else creeped out? Kira asked as they came to an intersection. Each path diverged from this point to its own infinity. So far as any could tell, there was no real difference in choices. For the longest time, the trio analyzed the options. Each choice lacked any difference, though. Finally, Kira caught sight of some movement in the distance down the right passage. Hey, Chip! Looks like your friends have shown up. Coming in their direction as if on some kind of patrol, from the far right was a few dog-sized, six-limbed robo-beasts. Each limb of the beast were jointed in 3 places, and they were all ball and socket joints. The paws had long claws that ticked with each step. The organic and non-organic parts blended almost perfectly, making it difficult to tell where biology stopped and technology began. Suddenly, one of the dog beasts noticed the trio, and they all started to sprint down the hall towards them. Almost naturally, Alex and Kira stood back to back, Alex facing the robo-beast, Kira covering the flank, and 017 turned towards the way they had come, covering the rear. The beast engaged without a sound, darting around in an effort to flank. Thankfully, it appeared the creatures had no ballistics capabilities. They rounded the trio in concentric circles, nipping and scratching. Then one bounded off a wall, jumping at Alex's throat, spinning in the air. Alex countered with an outside crescent kick. The force of the beast's impact on the corner chipped the wall, but then it got up, went back on the offensive with all 6 limbs. As Alex turned with the kick, Kira orbited to face the foes. One reared up and attacked with what could best be described as its right upper elbow. She countered with a paksao to the left, then back-spun heel kick to its head. "The metal is soft, like aluminum," she called out. "These squishy bits would be a better target. No cyborg can operate without its organic structure intact, and it will cause less damage to your own limbs." 017 countered as he punched through a beast's ribcage to pull out its heart. "Whatever works. Kill now, talk later," Alex grunted, squeezing one of the thing's torsos, partially crushing it. The beast managed to contort itself enough to knock Alex upside the head. Alex let it go and staggered, applying pressure to a gaping wound that had appeared over his right eye. 017 kept his cool as Kira's eyes turned to berserker rage. "Fucker!" Kira exclaimed, launching herself off the wall and elbow smashed the thing's skull. Another beast attacked her, and she countered with rolling punches. 017 moved to guard Alex from behind as he struggled to regain his senses. Even dazed, Alex was a force to be reckoned with. A trained fighter, he did not need to think for his body to react. The simplicity of the creature's fighting styles was animalistic and easily countered by any trained fighter. Each of the trio had situational awareness rivaling hindsight. They all used the environment to their advantage, chipping away at the defenses of the enemies and waiting for the coup de grace. The fight was furious, but the simple nature of the enemies kept it from getting to be more than they could handle. Eventually, there was 3 left. One fending off 017, one was engaged with Kira, and the last was sneaking up on her. As it raised a limb to club Kira to the ground, Alex snapped to full alert. With a howl of rage, he caught the club and snapped the arm in half. Kira finished with her enemy and turned to assist Alex in bludgeoning the sneaky one. With its blood all over their faces, they stared at each other, slowly closing in, mere centimeters from each other. Eyes wide with adrenaline and something more, they breathed slowly, enjoying each other's scent. 017 collapsed the skull of the last one and took the pair in. "There will be time for coitus later. Now we still have to move on." Alex and Kira suddenly realized that they were easing towards each other and snapped away. "Like I would ever have, do that, offspring of the warmongers," Kira panted, pacing, trying to come to terms with her feelings. "Warmongers? What are you talking about?" Alex was confused about so many things. "The eugenicists started the schism. It was a group of people on Mars that wanted to make themselves and their offspring better. Nothing more," Alex returned loudly. "Then the general populace started getting antsy about an attack and started augmenting themselves," 017 continued, performing an examination of the contusions on Alex's face. "Then, fear about the augmenters prompted others to perform gene splicing, creating the transgenics." 017 was equipped with a laser suture device, and he carefully closed all the wounds that he could find. While his bedside manner was lacking, he did function with utmost efficiency. "Yeah, and at that point the eugenicists attacked our civilian doctors in our labs on Venus." "It was a recon in force. We wanted to see what was going on. You attacked us." Alex jumped up, causing 017 to burn a line on his cheek. History is full of contradictions. One side will always remember even the slightest of slights of their enemy and never admit to their own. 017 moved on to Kira. "While you cannot forget and will not forgive, you two need to start judging each other as individuals, not for the sins of your people." "Oh, and what makes you so high and mighty?" Kira scoffed as 017 closed a wound on her forehead. "During the schism, the hegemony of augmenters sacrificed more and more biology for the tiniest of edge we could get. It was finally decided, in a fit of heated emotion by the way, to sacrifice all emotions for the edge of pure logic." 017 finished fixing up Kira. "It was at that time that we realized we had no emotional attachment for a home, no need to be sacrificing person after person for the emotional desire for a piece of land. It was more logical to sacrifice the land in favor of an undisputed base of operations. It was then that we left, and now, 300 years later, you still hate each other for things your ancestors did in a fit of passion. I am not high and mighty, just cold and distant. We should move on." "I think we should try to learn more about these things," Kira approached one of the bodies. "Know your enemy, right?" While she hoped she sounded confident, the revelations about the past had rattled her. Like Alex, who also hung back, she needed something to occupy her mind while she struggled to cope. 017, for his part, was content to let the Holy Organics come to grips with their own situation. The three took in everything while they performed a hot wash of the evolution. "Hey, you two!" Kira called while kneeling over one of the corpses. "This place is pretty clean, right?" "I'd say almost immaculate. Why?" Alex turned, striding over. "This thing has some kind of fungus on its servo control node." The group examined the inner workings of the creatures, and it was indeed odd. Despite no apparent damage or age, hair-like growths covered the electronics and biological components, wherever light was unlikely to shine. In fact, wisps writhed in the light, as if in pain. "Perhaps it's an embedded design," Alex shrugged. "After all, there are some trees back home that use fungal pods as an interconnecting neural net." "Unlikely," 017 replied. "That type of fungal transmission is inefficient for lifeforms with motive capability." "Yeah, and there are design features that suggest these things are invasive, i.e. they are not supposed to be there." "That is worrisome. If it can contaminate these cyborgs—" Alex struggled not to step back in concern. "These growths are not mature enough to produce spores. They were infected elsewhere," 017 reassured, "and this part of the facility does not appear to be infected either. In any event, we would already have been exposed during the fight." "Fungus doesn't like light, and it's pretty bright here. We should be fine, Ape." Kira smiled despite herself. For his part, the reassurance of Kira did help. Darn the luck. "Well, this is another check in the pro column for finding a defensible position. We need to move on and deal with these corpses later, if we have to." For the next eon of travel, the trio was silent. The revolution stirred in their head. Eventually, they came to a massive door in front of which they stood for quite some time. "Do we want to know what's beyond?" Kira's unintended double entendre hit home for Alex. "Just another option," Alex eventually sighed. "It's probably a good idea to at least check it out." They approached, for the first time, dreading the possibilities. At their approach, the door opened outward, letting in a brilliant blue-white light. "Huh! Spectral O-type. That's a supergiant. Or not?" He looked up, shielding his eyes as they walked into the light. "It does appear to be the size of a main-sequence yellow dwarf," 017 calculated. "Like the sun?" asked Kira, squinting in the light. "How could you know that?" "The outer edge of the Dyson sphere is approximately 3 AUs in diameter. That puts the inner surface of between Mars and Earth, and that star is visually the size of a dime," 017 explained. "That makes it the size of Sol." "And this sphere is amazing," Alex marveled. "That ocean must be bigger than Earth." They all took in the splendor of the inner surface. The surface stretched away up and towards the sun. Mountains rose, valleys sank, oceans swelled, plains undulated, forests and jungles heaved, and there were even patches of white that indicated tundra. Each feature was more massive than a single planet. Surrounding the star was a network of panels that orbited in 3 directions, casting light on about half of the visible surface. "It looks as if you two will have plenty of opportunity to be fruitful and multiply," 017 observed.
Thank you for listening. This has been the Dyson Trio, a presentation of the Polyverse. Feel free to share and subscribe and comment. The more that is out there, the more stories we can make. Have a pleasant evening.